Hello, fellow Araxians. Commander Sirius here. Welcome to surviving your 5th hour Planetside. We've gotten you started with the basics. We've talked about how you can join the community. We've talked about a whole bunch of currencies in the game. All important things to know. But one recently joined viewer brought up something that will be difficult for new players that doesn't even cross veteran players' minds. Dwayne says, hey, if you ever need an idea for a new video, would you be able to go over some of the terminology used? I spend nearly as much time shooting at people as I did trying to figure out what everyone was saying. Well, Dwayne, this video's for you. Guys, I would love to break it down for an image with every single thing I talk about, but that's just going to be too much editing. So I'm going to give you some sweet footage with some chill vibes, and just focus on some text cues that'll help you figure out some of the acronyms and nicknames that we use here on Araxis. To start, let's talk about vehicles. You might hear the term whale or sky whale. This refers to the Galaxy. The Galaxy is the large transport ship, and its slow, lumbering flight characteristics got it nicknamed the Whale. In fact, this nickname is so ingrained in the game's lore, they released a cosmetic horn of a whale call for it. So if it suddenly sounds like a pod of whales is crossing Araxis, you know where that sound's coming from. Heads up for incoming gal drops. Next up is the Lib. No, don't worry, the game's not going all political on you. It refers to the Liberator gunship, the main bomber platform in Planetside 2. If you hear people shouting about a spur, that's a nasty anti-infantry nose gun on one of those bad boys, so take cover. And if you happen to be in an armor column and someone starts shouting about a Dalton, that's the Liberator's big anti-vehicle cannon. Next up, we have the VALK. The VALK refers to the Valkyrie, which is 6-seat ship, 1 pilot, 1 gunner, and 4 jump seat. You'll most commonly hear this word in open platoons when the platoon leaders yell in redeploy and get into the VALKs. If a squad member is piloting one of these vehicles and they are in uncontested friendly territory, you will be able to spawn into it directly from your death screen. Look for it at the top of your spawn list. And finally, the last aircraft is the ESF, and that stands for Empire Specific Fighter. Each faction has their own unique VTOL fighter. Mosquito for the TR, Reaver for the NC, and Scythe for the VS. They are the most agile of the aircraft, and they are all single-seaters, but they come with 2 different types of weapons. So rather than getting hung up on what faction is attacking you, some people might just yell ESF's incoming. Before we get into the ground vehicles, I gotta take a little sidebar, as I realize I'm already using acronyms that I haven't explained yet. There are 3 factions in Planetside 2, the TERRAN Republic, the New Conglomerate, and the Vanu Sovereignty. And their names are shortened by their 2-letter acronyms. Now outside of the factions, there are some common pool things. Valkyries, Galaxies, and Lightnings, for example, are what are called NS vehicles. There are also NS weapons, like the NS-11 or NS-15, that any faction can use. NS stands for NANITE Systems. The lore goes that this is a third-party weapons supplier that will sell to all 3 factions, hence creating common pool weapons. On that same note, you will see robots running around Araxis called NS Operatives. You have to be a member in order to play this faction, and they have no faction allegiance. They will join whatever faction has the lowest population whenever they switch continent. And they have a limited arsenal. Okay, now on to the ground vehicles. The Lightning's harassers and flashes generally stick to their primary name. The Sunderer, however, has a few nicknames. The most common being just Sundy. Sometimes it's referred to as a bus because it transports infantry soldiers, and sometimes it can be referred to as an AMS. These vehicles used to require a certification called Advanced Mobile Station in order to be deployed as a spawn point. Now they have that ability by default, but the acronym stuck with them. And finally, the last key vehicle is the MBT. That acronym is Main Battle Tank. And again, each faction has a specific one. That is the Prowler for Terran Republic, the Mag Rider for VS, and the Vanguard for New Conglomerate. Now, while we're on vehicles, let's talk a little bit about some acronyms for the weaponry. AA stands for anti-air. This can be achieved with the Skyguard on the Lightning, Burster Arms on the Max, anti-air lock-on rockets on the Heavy Assault, and Rangers on a Sunder or a Harasser. AP refers to armor piercing, and both the MBTs and Lightnings have an AP option. This is generally used for AV work, or anti-vehicle. HE stands for high explosive. This is weaponry intended primarily for killing infantry. Now the term HE has since been removed from the game. The actual language in the game is now HESH for high explosive squash head, but some players still use the old acronym. And the final main tank cannon option is HEAT for high explosive anti-tank. The default cannons you start with on the main battle tanks are HEAT cannons. They are a good mix of high explosive anti-infantry capabilities and AV damage. Now, if you hear unique, interesting names, it's usually people referring to weapons. Here I'm using something called the Marauder. Its counterparts on other factions are the PPA and the Canister. Over time, you will hear these names and think PPA, Canister, Marauder. Oh, those are all ground vehicle mounted anti-infantry weaponry. Well, the PPA also has an ESF version. But over time, you will hear those callouts start to associate it with the right type of armaments that are coming at you. Okay, now let's sort of jump into the infantry realm of acronyms. Starting with the HA, or the Heavy Assault. This class main weaponry is the LMG, or Light Machine Gun. The most common loadout on the Heavy Assault is called Adreno-Weave. This refers to the Adrenaline Shield in their ability slot, and Nano-Weave armor in their suit slot. You might hear your platoon leader yell, "Max crash incoming, get out your DECIs." This refers to the Decimator of the Heavy Assault, the highest single-shot damage rocket launcher the Heavy Assault has access to. Don't feel like you have to use that one. It just does a little bit more direct damage, so that's the one veteran players usually use, and its nickname ends up being used the most. As we go through the infantry classes, we'll also be talking about some of the acronyms used in gunplay, and that's a big part of Heavy Assault. So you'll hear the terms ADS and hipfire. ADS stands for aiming down sight. By default, that's your right mouse button to scope in. Hip firing refers to any firing you do without scoping in. You are considered firing from the hip, and it is less accurate. Now, Heavy Assaults usually run a medkit in their utility slot. And when they get low on health, what they can do is do a dance or a shuffle back and forth while they chug medkits. So you may hear someone talking about medkit dancing or medkit chugging, and this refers to any infantry soldier that is trying to stay alive while spamming medkits to keep their health up. Next, let's talk about LAs, or the Light Assault. These are also referred to as C4 fairies, because in their utility slot they can carry 2 sticks of C4, they can jump off of towers, buildings, or out of aircraft, drift down on top of your armor column, and blow it up with C4. Now, just like you'll hear certain callouts for weapons on vehicles, you also hear callouts for loadouts on some of the infantry soldiers. So you might hear someone yell, "There's a nightmare shotty in the back." And that usually refers to a light assault soldier that dropped on the flank with a shotgun and using the implant Nightmare. That is, whenever they kill someone, they turn cloaked for 2 seconds. So that callout is trying to describe what you're looking for to shoot. Okay, now moving on to the medics. You may hear your platoon leader shout, "Get those revive grenades poppin'." This is usually near the end of a point cap, when the fight on a base is coming down to the wire. They know a lot of soldiers are going to be dying, so they want to preempt that with revive grenades that have a small detonation timer to hopefully trigger on players right as they die. Now, if the enemies have just thrown one of these revive grenades, you might hear your platoon leader yell, "Zombies!" This refers to dead corpses in the room you're in just getting hit by a revive grenade, so they're going to pop back up. It's as if they're coming back from the dead, and they're relatively easy kills, so they're called zombies. Every now and then as a medic, you may hear a Heavy Assault call for a pump. It means he wants you to keep your heal gun on him, and he'll step out probably into the line of fire, and you're expected to heal him while he's taking that damage. If you're a platoon leader calling for shield bubbles, that's an optional item for the medic's ability slot. By default, they have an area effect heal called Nano Regen. They can also insert into a shield generator, which is a deployable device that creates a bubble and returns shields to any friendlies in that area. They might also tell you to get your revive bandos out. To do this, you use the grenade bandolier in the suit slot, and the revive grenade in the grenade slot, and you can carry up to 4 revive grenades. And remember, Medic's class-specific weaponry is the AR, or an assault rifle. Okay, let's move on to the Engie, or the Engineer. You may hear engineers talking about their SPITTY. This refers to one of the Engineer's turret options, which is an artificial intelligence SPITFIRE turret. It will shoot at enemies of its own volition. If you hear someone calling to get archers out, that is an engineer-specific anti-material rifle that does some AV damage to vehicles and lots of damage to max units. Okay, and the final SOFTY infantry class is the Infiltrator, sometimes referred to as infils or cloakers. This is the class that can use sniper rifles and can go mostly invisible with their cloak. Now, associated with infils, sometimes you'll hear people talking about their CQC BASRs. That refers to a close quarters combat bolt action sniper rifle. Each faction has a specific one, the SAR-42 for TR, the Ghost for VS, and the SAS-R for the NC. A specific loadout of Infiltrator is referred to as a Stalker. When Infiltrators use the Stalker cloak, they can go invisible indefinitely while they aren't moving. Commonly used along with Stalker cloaks are one-hit kill knives or power knives. These are faction-specific activatable knives that will kill in one stroke, unlike a regular knife that will take 2 or 3 hits. If you hear someone asking for darts, they're really looking for an Infiltrator to use their recon tool to shoot darts around the facility so enemies will appear on your minimaps. Along the same line, people may call for a DILDAR. This is the deployable tool the Infiltrator can take called a motion spotter. It's a radar that is shaped like, well, you can figure out the rest. Outside of sniper rifles, Infiltrators can also use SMGs or submachine guns. And finally, on to the max unit. You may hear your platoon leader yell, "Max crash incoming!" It is a mechanized unit that costs nanites to pull. And sometimes when a group is trying to break a very difficult hold, they'll pull a whole bunch of these maxes at one time, and this is referred to as a max crash. Max loadouts can include anti-infantry, anti-vehicle, and anti-air loadouts. So you will commonly hear a modifier in front of the word max to explain what it is capable of. So you may hear someone call out SCAT max, which is an NC anti-infantry max, or you might hear burster max, which is not faction specific but is an anti-air max, or you might hear someone talk about a Zoe max, which refers to a Vanu max using its faction specific ability, which back in the day was super overpowered, so they were everywhere, but since they've been nerfed significantly, so you don't hear that call as often. Okay, that gets you a good basis of knowledge for the lingo surrounding infantry. Now let's jump into some squad play terminology. You may hear people talking about the bacon, or saying the bacon is crispy, or need new bacon. They are referring to the squad beacon. There is some etiquette around talking about the squad beacon. Never say squad beacon down or bacon down. This is confusing terminology. People tend to want to say it when they place the beacon because you throw it on the ground. But people also say it when they kill an enemy beacon. So if you say bacon down or squad beacon down, people are going to be confused. Did you kill an enemy one or place a friendly one? So try to be specific there. Say killed the enemy beacon or say deploying our squad beacon now. Or use bacon if you're hungry. When running with a squad, you'll hear a lot of building callouts. It could be called crescent or banana building. You may hear things about powerhouse or triple stacks or mini gens. You will learn this terminology with time. I don't have time to do an exhaustive list here, but I will try to get a video out on those types of callouts later on. Just know if you hear something like that, they're usually talking about a certain location within that base. If you hear someone talking about the SCU, that is the Spawn Control Unit. Bases like biolabs, tech plants, and amp stations have something called an SCU that if you control it and overload it, after 60 seconds or 120 seconds, it will be destroyed and the enemy will lose their hard spawn on that base. You may hear your platoon leader calling for routers. Routers are a deployable spawn that can be placed indoors and in no deploy areas, but you need to be in possession of a construction base that has a router spire to pull these routers out. If you're new to the game, that job won't be on you. Just be aware that's the type of spawn they're calling for. If you hear them yelling that the ZERG has arrived, It means you're about to have a large influx of enemy players. The term's original use means a large force moving around the map, generally uncontested, but now it's generally used for any force that outpopulates your own. Bases have capture points. In order to take those points, you need to have a lattice link to that base, a controlled territory, and then you need to stand on the control point in order to make it controlled by your faction. Now, after that is complete, you could leave the area and the base will still be ticking in your faction's favor. If you do decide to leave, this is called a ghost cap, because you will not be around to maintain the capture. Sometimes your PL, your platoon leader, may call for your platoon to start ghost caps on one front of the map. This will force the enemy to scramble around and resecure all of them. Or he may assign different squads to defend from ghost caps, to stop the enemy from capping your territory. Sometimes your platoon leaders may call for an airball, either to bombard a base or take down a bastion, and he may dictate what type of loadout he wants in those aircraft, depending on what you're doing. If he's using text chat, he may say A2G, which means air to ground. That's something like rocket pods or Hornet missiles. Or if he's assaulting a bastion, he may call for air to air. This is something like standard nose guns, and then in your secondary using Tomcats, Coyote missiles, or an additional afterburner. Okay, soldiers, that gives you a good rundown on some of the terminology you'll hear in squad play. Another area of Planetside that has a lot of nicknames is within the currency. And I dive into all those explanations about the currency, what they're named in Surviving Your Fourth Hour. So feel free to catch up on that video to review those acronyms. Okay, fellow Araxians, that should give you a pretty good base of knowledge for some of the terminology you will hear Planetside. I'm sure there's a million more I missed, and some that are probably pretty vital. So if you can think of one I missed, please go down to the comments and list it there. And if there's one you've heard that you don't know, as well, go down to the comments and ask that question, and I'm sure someone will get it answered for you very fast. Good luck out there, fellow Araxians. I know it can feel like a strange foreign place when you're getting into it, but you will figure it out and become a permanent resident Planetside and fit in with all the other salty vets out there. That's it for now, fellow Araxians. I'm Commander Sirius, and I'm going to leave you right there for now. But until next time, I will see you Planetside.